Ladies and gentlemen, now please welcome back Ashish Patel.
Thank you. All right. Some of you might have saw me speak a little bit earlier today about AI, but now I'm joined with two fantastic panelists here to discuss online communities and effectively what's the status of online communities today, how should we be thinking about leveraging them, and what is the future of communities online. So again, I'm Ashish Patel. I'm the Chief Insights Officer of Groupe Nine Media. We're a holdings company that owns 4 brands, Now This, The Dodo, Thrillist, and Seeker. And I'm with John Adcox, the CEO of Gramarye, as well as Colin Burns, Senior Director of Client Success and Delight at Sprinklr. So I'll hand it over to you guys to do a quick intro, and we'll take it from there.
I'm John Adcox. I'm the CEO, co-founder of Gramarye Media. We're a new startup, book publisher and movie studio here on the East Coast with a methodology for disrupting the traditional Hollywood studio model with a methodology for mitigating the risk of original content that has the DNA to become a blockbuster franchise across media channels, lower production costs, and control global distribution.
So, Colin Burns, I lead client delight and customer success at Sprinklr. We're a software as a service that helps big B2B and B2C brands with modern engagement, mostly on social media. So, and we work with many Fortune 1000 companies globally.
Great. Colin, let me just kick a question to you, but just in terms of the recent evolution of online communities, from your perspective, how have you seen this evolve kind of, from the end of the dot-com era into the rise of mobile?
Yeah, so what I think I'm seeing of recent is that the traditional online community that we might know is somewhat disappearing. I think we're seeing consumers go to a mobile first, like what you just said, mobile first messaging-based community. I think there's a couple that are still sticking around, are really, really strong. Reddit obviously is doing amazing, but the idea of the forum is maybe fading a little bit. Folks are going to more of a private interaction that's real time. So I think the idea of community is shifting. We might not be able to see it like we used to, where we could go and just, it shows at the top of the Google search rankings, it's probably behind some kind of messenger app amongst maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 friends.
And I guess, John, kind of same question. How have you seen the evolution of online communities over time? And then a little bit more about how you're starting to kind of tap into those communities to leverage them for Gramarye.
Sure. My experience is almost exactly the opposite, but we're looking at specific niche communities. It's no secret, communities form around story. You guys know about Dragon Con out here or Comic Con on the West Coast. When we were doing our research through our incubator at Georgia Tech, we went to one of the Harry Potter pub crawls. That's the price you got to do for research, right? And the communities we're seeing are really thriving. Story's something that says, you're like me. There's something in us that likes to find people that we think of as our tribe, the people that we're close to, and story's one of the things that unites people. And we're seeing really strong communities forming, still online, still in forums, mobile first as well, and in real space. In fact, we've met people who say they met their best friends through a love of a shared story, even though they were in different countries at the time, which I think is pretty astonishing. But the point to us is when those communities form, they're worth billions. So our job is to sort of seed those communities and watch them develop before we make a decision to move forward with the film. So that's part of how we mitigate risk, is a sort of feedback economy of fan response through community.
And so when you're talking about, just like a very real example, so if you're thinking about a story or a concept that you potentially want to purchase and then develop into film or games or whatnot, how do you guys actively create community or actively start to seed that in ways to get the feedback that you're looking for?
This is a long answer, so I'm going to try and tell it quickly. So if you guys want to ask me more details afterwards, I'll be around. Basically, we're looking for unpublished book manuscripts that meet a long list of criteria. that are the sort of stories that are likely to generate a community. We spend a full year developing that story after we acquire it, and at the same time preparing it for adaptation across media channels. And at the end of that year, we have a polished manuscript, we have a treatment, maybe a script, a budget, production artwork, stuff like that. So we're ready for adaptation. And then we publish it both as a hardcover book and as what we call ebook 2.0. These are sold through app stores for your phone or tablet and are layered with interactivity that make it magical. It's like a book from the library at Hogwarts on your tablet or smartphone. But this layer of interactivity provides sort of fertile ground for a community to form. There's forums there, there's gameplay, and there's a way to earn blockchain tokens when you either give us data or share with your friends, and we can track that spread of viral brand awareness. All of that is, we were saying earlier, a way to sort of shift the current model, which is hunter-gatherer, to an agricultural model where we're farming the types of stories that are likely to form a community. And when we see that community forming, when we see that passion, when we see that connection, we'll move forward with the film and we'll green light. If we don't see it, we don't, period. It's all driven by fan feedback and community.
Great, and Colin, so you work every day with brands, some of the biggest brands in the world, and help them effectively build and seed communities across social platforms and other locations. But as you're advising your clients, how do you speak to them about developing community, and what are the best ways to kind of tap into that and leverage that for business goals generally?
So what we tell customers and what the great customers are doing is they're listening and doing research on their communities first. So we enable them to do that, but then they have big teams that will go out and just do nothing. And that's what we recommend. Just sit, listen, learn, find out what they want, what are the stories that are organically taking place before they go in and engage with those, or try to foster some kind of relationship in those communities. Because I think, very similar, there are a lot of great micro communities out there that you can harness a lot of power, develop, you can market to, you can advertise to, as well as glean insights from. But that's our POV with them is let's walk, kind of the crawl, walk, run model. Let's start crawling first.
Are there any examples that kind of come to mind of anyone that's doing this better than others in terms of just fostering and engaging a community around, I don't know if it's a concept or a brand itself? Sorry to put you on the spot there.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I was sort of thinking about this more holistically. If you think about how brands engage on Twitter now, they're less, and I think how Twitter has encouraged this, and then what brands have really taken to it is to sound like the audience on Twitter more than like they sound like a traditional brand. I think we all point to Wendy's sort of and made this the best and did this the best, but other brands are doing it really well. I was just looking at Whataburger earlier, but if you think about Twitter as a very large community, real-time community, I mean, and that platform is doing really, really well. Yeah, I would say that's probably the best example of Wendy's, Whataburger, and there's tons out there where brands are sounding like and trying to be like and are engaging just in line with their customers on a community.
Can I ask you a question on that?
Sure.
Do you ever see it happening backwards where communities form around a brand from outside? I mean, sports teams would be an obvious one, but anything else?
Yeah, that's, you know what? I wish I would have thought about this a little bit more, but I think.
No, please.
No, yeah, I mean, I do. I know there's examples out there, but yeah, I think if you look at like things, historically we've always had those, right? In the book, The Tipping Point, he talks about brands that were built from a community. I think there's probably modern ones that are emerging from social channels right now. I just got to think about what they are.
Groupe Nine's based in New York. Literally right around the corner of our office is the Supreme store.
Yeah.
So Supreme Street, started as a skate brand, is now valued at over $2 billion, I believe, which effectively went through a strategy of limited releases of anything that they put out. So whether it's a shirt or a shoe, they effectively put out a limited amount. They saw that a lot of the people that were buying this were posting it on Instagram, mostly to resell. and they started to kind of embrace that reseller market. You see the same thing with Nike and sneakers as well. But that's probably, at least off the top of my head, a couple cases where it started from a product first, and then a community developed, and the brand has done something to address that community.
Or Crocs. Somehow Crocs is cool again.
Crocs are cool again.
Maybe not again, but cool.
I think I missed that meeting.
So one of the things that we touched base on a little bit earlier was this historic change from more macro-based forums into more micro and niche communities. And I'll throw this question to both of you. Do you guys anticipate that trend to further in? Do you think there will be a retraction back into macro? Essentially, it's another way to ask, is there a risk for a community in being too niche, and is that not sustainable?
You want to take that?
Yeah. I think the niche communities and the micro communities have been around a lot longer. In our business, the famous example is Star Trek, which was canceled after 3 seasons, and then this thing emerged called organized fandom, which, yes, is an oxymoron, but all these letter writing campaigns started, and the conventions and all that stuff that eventually brought the show back as a film, and lots more films and lots and lots and lots of TV series. And that was a pretty astonishing ground roots kind of thing, but it was a very specific niche. It wasn't macro. Most of the world probably had no idea that was going on, and probably wouldn't have cared if they did. But this specific audience was large, it was vocal, and real. And I think another one you see are sports teams. If you go look at forums that are still existing and thriving, a lot of them revolve around either a story, Marvel Universe or Star Wars, or a sports team, the Braves. Those, I think, have been around. I think one of the reasons that Facebook emerged is because there was a generation of people that were starting to miss things, that had graduated college or finished high school and left behind the community they had known. And this was a way to sort of touch base with that past. And then it grew and evolved into something different. And what's still thriving on Facebook are these niche audiences. The Harry Potter forums, the Braves forums, political forums, church forums, especially as you're seeing more and more divides. People are gathering their tribes and surrounding themselves with people that they feel a sense of safety and comfort around. And those are happening online.
I totally agree. I mean, if you think about what Facebook just came out and said today, which is the future is private, and then you combine that with this idea of communities, I still think those still work hand in hand. These communities, they might be a little bit more private and walled off, and they might be little or small, but they're still going to be powerful and as powerful as they ever have been. And we see brands come to us and tell us all the time that there are tiny little communities out there that are so impactful and powerful to them as a brand that they use and love and find invaluable. We hear stories about how diapers are being optimized and improved based on what they heard out of some small community of parents. We hear that from brands all the time. So I think, there's a trend of moving to privacy, but I think the communities are as powerful or more powerful now than they ever have been.
I have one more point on that, and this is something we've been talking about a lot at Gramarye. We're depending on fan feedback to help us make decisions on what we move forward with. But there's an ethical question, because we are mining data, and we also have to be mindful of privacy. In our case, we're looking at the story itself, the book, the text, and looking to see what people are responding to, what they're rereading, what they're underlining, what they're sharing with their friends, and frankly, if they're sharing with their friends. But we reward that. One, we have to disclose it and say, we're not looking at you, we're looking at the story. And two, we give rewards that are meaningful in the form of blockchain tokens that are part of an economy that I'll go into later if you're interested. But that ethical question is really important to us. We're solving it through disclosure and reward, but that's about the best we've come up with so far. Is that something
That's over my head with the blockchain.
Okay.
I'll actually want to touch base on that in a second, but just going back to kind of this trend of communities focusing, or effectively becoming more niche, paired with the rise in mobile, the rise in social, and the fact that people can congregate in so many more locations than they have in the past. This is more specific to Colin, but like, how would you advise brands to tap into this ever-spreading ecosystem to kind of leverage those insights like finding that diaper community. How do you approach that from a brand perspective at this point?
Well, first and foremost, like I said a minute ago, listen first, act second. That's one of our biggest things we talk to customers about. The other idea is engage where they are. Don't try to pull them into your own community sometimes. We're seeing that the best brands aren't trying to stand up their own walled garden. They'll just go engage in the garden with the community. Like we talked about, maybe the old school forum idea is shifting away and it's kind of moving towards the Facebook kind of group. And so let's be part of that Facebook group. It's okay. You can add value there.
And I guess, John, kind of like the flip of that question. So what you were describing in terms of the book 2.0 or the future of the book and the interactive elements, that seems much more like a closed loop system. Are there other pieces of feedback you're pulling in from open networks? And then I guess a second follow-up, do you think that blockchain coin that you incentivize users with is helpful in receiving authentic feedback?
First question first. There's no way we can stop a forum popping up on Facebook, and we wouldn't want to if we could. We're looking at ways to try and link them. So if there's a community that you access inside the book to talk to other people who are reading the book, and we're trying to time lock it too. So if I'm reading chapter 1 and you're on chapter 10, I only see your comments on chapter 1. So we're sort of communicating in a time-shifted sort of way. But that would also happen offline as well, outside of our system on Facebook. And we're looking at ways that we can link them. Obviously, if those conversations are happening in public, as it were, in a Facebook situation, more people are driven to our ecosystem, so that's great for us. How that's going to work, I'm not sure I know the answer yet. The second question, the blockchain token, I think so. A large part of what we have in our books are games. And if you look at games like Fortnite, where the average player spends something like $80 to customize a character in a game that's free, and this doesn't help you play the game better, it just makes the character look different. There's an economy there, and giving people a token that is the coin of the realm in this virtual space, I think is important. And it's a meaningful reward for meaningful action.
Great, so we're coming up on time. Again, to put you guys a little bit on the spot, any bold predictions for the next 10 years in community?
10 years for community. I think you're going to see a lot more smaller communities and fewer macro communities. If you look at Reddit, the Grandmaster, and Facebook, they're big collections of small communities. It's like a city with neighborhoods.
Yeah, very micro around things that people are just hyper-focused on and interested in, and it could be 5 to 10 people, but that's okay.
Great. Well, thank you all for the time. Thank you, Moxie, for putting this on. And thank you, John and Colin.
We're out of time.